Hi, and welcome to the Stock Scores Market Minutes for November 6, 2017. This week's topic, you are your enemy. We'll get into that before the market analysis and then my trade of the week on DCIX. The greatest hurdle for traders to overcome is themselves. To be successful, it's more than just having a good strategy. You must be fearless. You must be confident, disciplined, focused, rational. You can spend a lot of time focusing on finding the right stock to buy, but if you can't be fearless, confident, disciplined, focused, and rational, it really doesn't matter. To be a great trader, you have to overcome yourself. So don't just focus on how to pick the right stock. Put your emphasis in your self-development, and your trading will benefit. All right, let's get into this week's analysis. This is the chart of the S&P 500 30-day 60-minute. And there's something that I really want everyone to notice, and that is how the volatility has gone from very narrow to much wider. And that demonstrates that investors are getting more uncertain. Now, the market is still trending up. We have rising bottoms, so the bulls are in control, but that raise in the volatility shows us that investors are getting maybe a little bit nervous. There's more volatility, more uncertainty, and that could be the sign of more volatility to come. Now, looking at that longer term chart of the S&P, we are going a little bit parabolic. There is our upward trend line, roughly, and we are running away from it somewhat. It's not terrible, it's not scary, but it is at the top of that range, and so the upside is getting a little bit limited. Now, that's the S&P 500. When you go look at something like the semiconductor sector, it's got a trend like that. And so some of these technology sectors have run very quickly. And as you know, if you've listened to this video over the many weeks I've been doing it, one of our rules is when price starts to run away from trend line, it's a sign that there is emotion in the market. And some sectors, particularly in the technology area, there is emotion in that market. And that usually results in a pullback to the trend line. So watch for that. No sign of it yet, but keep an eye out for it. Russell 2000 has been in a sort of a holding pattern. That's a little flag pattern. We have a run up. We have a flag. What I'm waiting for now is a breakout. It tried to break out this week and failed. And so it really seems as though money just wants to stay in those large cap leaders and isn't too interested in looking for alpha in the smaller cap stocks. If it does, if we get a breakout of that flag pattern, which would have to be a break to the upside right there, and we go into another upward trend, that is a great place to make money. Those small caps tend to move a lot quicker than the large caps with better follow through, better reward for risk, less capital intensive. So if you like trading, these are certainly more fun to trade, but we need that breakout from that pattern for that to happen. Moving along to the TSX, you can see that this trend went a little bit parabolic and it corrected back, and it's basically come back to the linear trend line where it bounced. So that's a real good example of that rule that I spoke about. Price runs away from trend lines, it usually comes back to the trend line. The trend here is up until we break that short-term trend. I wouldn't be too worried, but certainly watch for that. Looking at the longer-term chart, you can see that the Canadian market has really underperformed the US market, not as strong of a trend. We've only got about 2 months of upward trending action in this year. With that said, the Canadian dollar has fallen against the US dollar. So when you take that out, if you're a foreigner, an American, let's say, with US dollars buying the Canadian market, even though this has gone up 8 or 9% in the last 2 months, when you factor in the currency effect, it's only gone up maybe 3 or 4%. So it's not attracting global capital like the US market is. Moving along to the TSX Venture, we are building a pennant pattern. You can see that volatility is diminishing. We're tightening in that pattern. We had an upward trend into it, so we should get a break to the upside out of it. But until we get that strong price break, something like this, where you get a good, strong week breaking out of the pattern, wouldn't get too excited about this sector. Of course, individual stocks might be able to do well because they are trading on their own story. But in general, investors not too interested in the TSX Venture stocks right now. Moving along to the US bond market, this is a weekly chart going back 3 years. We had an up week for bonds. They are really stuck in this choppy range, not a lot of good message coming from the market on bonds. The fact that it went up a little bit last week, a sign that the interest rates are going down a little bit. but not decisively so. There's no break from a pattern here, so I think this is really just kind of a boring sideways market for US bonds. The US dollar broke its downward trend line, building rising bottoms, broke out from a rising bottom. Looks to me like it wants to go higher. And so if you need to buy US dollars, it's probably better to do it sooner than later because it does look as though that US dollar chart is going to move up. Moving along to gold, of course, a strengthening US dollar, not good for gold, but this chart doesn't look bad. It just doesn't look good either. It's trading in this range where we're getting compressing volatility. It's called a pennant pattern. Until we break out of that pattern, I wouldn't be too excited about the prospects for gold. Oil broke through resistance this week. Nice optimism that had been building, and I do think it's likely to go higher. The problem is that the upside is limited to about that area, which is the top of the range. And so, yes, I do think it will move higher, but it doesn't have enough upside to really justify the risk. You can maybe trade some individual stocks, safer place to put money right now because it doesn't have the downside that something like a semiconductor stock might have, but not considerable upside either. And finally, the VIX chart, we had that spike in volatility. It's basically gone back to where it was. Volatility is low as it indicates that there is not a lot of fear in the market. Maybe there should be because we are going parabolic on some of those trends. So my ratings bullish on both US and Canadian stocks, but with an ounce of caution. Gold, neutral long-term, bearish short-term. Oil, neutral long-term, bullish short-term. The market trends are going parabolic, which makes them risky. Not all the trends, or not all of the sectors are, by the way, but some of those technology sectors. And that makes them risky for a pullback that is likely soon. This does not mean the trend will end because you can simply pull back to the trend line and then continue higher for another 2 years. But if we do get a break of that trend line, then we want to be cautious. There's no signs of weakness right now, but watch for breaks of that very short-term upward trend as a sign that it's maybe time to take some profit. Oil coming into resistance, gold is quiet, and fear is low. And now on to the trade of the week. And this was a trade from Friday on DCIX, Diana Container Ship. And I have to say that this is probably the highest reward for risk trade that I've had this year. The entry signal came right there on my intraday pullback strategy. This was a day trade, trading very abnormally right from the get-go. That's why I had it on my watch list. And this stock actually went up about 38 RR before pulling back into the close and still closed up, 18 or 19 RR. Here's the thing we talked about. There's the parabolic trend, and there was the break of the parabolic trend that got you out a little earlier before the pullback into the close. Great trade. You don't get them like this very often, but what a mover, moving from an entry signal right around $4.50, topping out at almost $20 in a single day. Well, that has been, pardon me, the Stock Scores Market Minutes. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video. Have a great week in the market, and trade well.